Hello, this is part 2 of the presentation Intro to Blended Learning and the Professional Development Workshop for DC Virgo. At this point, you should have watched presentation part 1 and responded in the Padlet how your students could engage in the time, pace, and place decisions around their own learning. Next, we're going to talk a little bit more about those NCDPI guiding principles. The Guiding Principles document continues by talking about how blended learning should be accessible by all students for which the learning is intended, using a variety of offline and online strategies, address the curricular and instructional needs, and of course be aligned to standards. The majority of those make perfect sense to me. All of them do, but if you think about it, of course we want all of our learning to be accessible by the students. And we need to make sure we understand, of course, what access the students have in order to be able to have the ability to engage in blended learning. And that is very contextual. It's not necessarily just technology access or Wi-Fi access or access to specific devices, but it really is other aspects of access too. It's making sure that we are creating learning that's at the level for our students. We do that all the time. The piece I want to kind of key in on here is this using a variety of offline and online strategies. So if you remember, blended learning is a mix of online learning and classroom learning. The online learning can be inside the classroom. The online learning can be at home. But the home learning can also be a variety of other activities, inquiry strategies, choices, other things that students could be engaging in that don't necessarily have to be technologically driven. So I want us to continue to think about that as we go through the next few stages of a professional development, is that blended learning doesn't necessarily mean that home is where we do the online work and school is where we do the book and talking and discussions and activities, but we can flip things around that way as well. We can use those online devices in the classroom, and we can do some learning offline at home with some structure provided by our teachers. And of course, we expect our learning to address those curricular and instructional needs and be aligned to the standards. Blended learning should also be, DPI continues, responsive to diverse learning groups. And that, of course, is something y'all do on a daily basis, all the time anyway. Very well versed in your students' needs and in their learning and their mastery of certain concepts and skills. So blended learning should continue to be responsive to those diverse learning groups and their needs. Blended learning should consider the whole child and the home learning environment. And again, this could be access issues, this could be device issues, but it could also be really what motivates that child. It may very well be that those activities at home should be offline activities because the online work works best in the classroom environment or in the school building where they have tech support and they have structure and they have help with the tools, whatever the context may need to be. And blended learning should adapt to the limitations and variances of the local context. So that could be, of course, like in the instance that we have a pandemic or a hurricane and we all shift and have to go out of the school building. We're having to adapt to that local context. In both of those instances, we may or may not have internet access. So again, it's not necessarily that online learning works at home and classroom learning is in the building, but it can be flipped and changed and mixed and blended in that way as well. Similarly, if there are aspects of the local context that come to bear, you can bring those into the learning as well, like you do on a daily basis. If there's something happening in current events, you bring it into the classroom. Same thing goes with blended learning, and sometimes blended learning allows us to do that better because we can pull in those digital resources. We can pull in the clips from the news media. We can pull in social media accounts. We can bring in a wide variety of different media to enhance the classrooms and our students' learning. So thinking about your specific context, think about what you've learned about blended learning so far. I want you to pause here and take the next 5 to 10 minutes, go into the Padlet for the workshop, and think about knowing my students as I know them, knowing our school, knowing our families, knowing our local context, what do I see as some of those opportunities that blended learning presents? And then also, what are some of those challenges? So it may be connectivity, it may be devices, it may be um, needing support for technology, but there may be other challenges that come up. So what might be some of those opportunities? What might blended learning provide us that we haven't been able to do before? And then what are those challenges? Because we always want to make sure that we understand what the challenges are and do whatever we can to mitigate those challenges. So take about 5 to 10 minutes. This is the end of part 2 presentation. Go into the Padlet and respond to these and then come back for part 3.